We are now live on YouTube with the June 10th meeting of folks who are interested in HTTP imports or HTTPS. Brad, take it away.
Sure. So this meeting is just about trying to figure out what we need to do to roll out HTTPS imports. It's really a long discussion on GitHub, and that discussion is kind of a wall of text. We're trying to figure out the specific features we need to roll out without a flag and with a flag and separate them, I think, for this. So this is going to be a planning meeting. I expect most of these kind of meetings every 2 months, I'd expect to be planning so that we have time to try to land PRs and work towards a goal rather than having a single huge PR that touches everything from HTTP infrastructure to policies to the ES module loader. I think such a large PR is not viable in how PRs land in Node Core right now. So I want to figure out how we can stage it. And that is what I want to talk about right now. So we have two agenda items. One is trying to figure out what the requirements are for a flagged implementation. And so let's start talking about those specific things. Looks like we have a few items added.
I've been filling things in, so.
Okay.
So well, the first one is local development. Okay, this might sound simple, but it requires some decisions on how we want to develop things. This feature, how do we want to enable developers to develop this locally? So I don't know, are we supporting proxies? Are we supporting, like, I don't know, there's a few questions. How do we handle the HTTPS requirement of having a certificate for local development of these of modules? So, you know, I'm flagging stuff, okay? I'm just point out things that were probably not obvious. And then there is the decision. We came to a decision in the wall of text about the mixed mode with packages from npm back and forth. So that's also something that I added, but, you know, please feel free to add stuff if you.
Yeah, let's just talk about local development. So local development, we have a few possibilities. HTTPS is indeed I think the general consensus of what we want to support when you're doing anything in production. In previous discussions, we've also talked about having a mode that does allow raw HTTP, like a flag for unsafe HTTP imports or something like that, which I think could be a lot easier than setting up a proxy for local development. I'm not entirely sure they need to be exclusive with each other. So I guess the first thing I want to know is how people feel about having this kind of unsafe mode where you can load HTTP, perhaps limiting it to an accepted list that's put in from the command line or something like that.
I would just be even more, you know, more ruthless about it, and we can even enable in the experimental situation, we can just enable them as for a localhost, and that's it.
The localhost DNS entry, or
yeah, localhost DNS entries.
Okay, and then just have a few well-known things like 127.0.0.1.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So
like, again, this is very, you know, I don't think it will survive the experimental situation, but it's for me, it's enough to give people something to play with. Okay.
Yeah. So for experimental, enable all local addresses. Local.
And what about self-signed certificates? HTTPS.
If we did that, we needed a way to generate them from Node Core, which it's not there at the minute. So I would not go there. There's another discussion, okay, to some extent.
So I think generating self-signed certs, there are ways to get Node to accept them already. So I don't know if we need to do anything for that. That would just be the same.
Okay, so you would just add the, I mean, enable any self-signed certificates globally, and it would work with import from HTTPS then.
I don't think you can enable all self-signed certs. I think you.
Yeah, you can definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible.
Okay. So let's see.
Let's write it down. It's like for me, it's every single time I see people generating a self-signed cert, I see problems. So I recently passed through and I removed half of them, most of them from repos because people were opening security vulnerabilities against them. So.
So this also brings up a good discussion. Do we have a reason to support self-signed certs versus a local proxy? So you can do a connection, HTTPS connection to a local proxy that'll go out and do HTTP connections.
Well, that's no, I would not support that.
I don't think we can prevent that.
No, but
it's gonna look.
Well, no, we can actually. Like again, if Node Core does not currently have support for proxies, so as long as we don't have it.
A user can always just create that proxy locally.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to. Yeah. It doesn't have to be supported by Core.
They need to deploy some level of Nginx or reverse proxy to do this. It does not support the concept of an HTTP proxy. So.
Correct. So.
Which that is, to some extent, if they end up implementing their own thing, yeah, they can wreck themselves to some extent.
None of this is talking about production, so I don't know about wreck yourself, but it's a thing.
Yeah. Well, there are attacks here. There are possible attacks there to developer machines. So it's as again.
Yes.
I am.
That's going to be true for all of our local development stuff.
Exactly. So I am. To be honest, I am. As long as it's clear for local development, it's like for me, it's a huge +1.
Okay, and then you were talking about HTTP proxy support in Core.
Yeah, this is also something that might be needed. Probably not needed right now, but probably needed long term.
So I'm just.
I'm not sure it's needed right now, but it's probably needed in the unflagged situation.
Sure. For self-signed certs, do we think it's needed for the
No,
flag?
I don't. No, not for experimental, at least.
HTTPS is a must for production. I'd agree. Decision on mixed mode. So I can explain this. When you have an npm package, it's going to be loaded off the file URL scheme. And when you are doing HTTP or HTTPS imports, they're going to be loaded off the HTTP or HTTPS schemes. HTTP and HTTPS have origins according to web standards, and the file never matches either of those origins. So you can't import a local file from a HTTP or HTTPS import by default, unless we really do some stuff which is kind of icky and invalidate a lot of the origin policies that these things are being built upon. So I think, at least in the wall of text, it was kind of stated by default, we just have to reject them.
That's perfect from my point of view. So it's as long as this decision is being made, and I think it's totally fine one.
That's not to say it will be impossible to do. You could write a loader, you could do other things. You can punch holes in it.
Yeah, but it doesn't need to be the default. So if...
No. Yes. So there's that. We do have a very strange cores implementation in that PR. I don't know if people have looked at it. So cores by default only sends a request from the base origin of a web browser. So if you're on a page, example.com, all cores requests will show it's coming from example.com. In the PR, it shows the referring module as the origin. This actually is weird. It's not how other things work, but it's the only way to block cross-origin stuff. We don't have the concept of a base origin in Node. And so all these ideas of same domain origins are being kind of thrown away by this PR, if we care.
Sorry, I don't understand this.
Okay, so on the web, when you import a module.
No, yeah, I'm familiar with cores on the web. I don't see the connection on how it would work.
So we do a cores request still in this PR.
Why? Why it's needed? Okay, like it's on the server. Like I don't understand why the cores thing is needed when there is the browser. You want to prevent your code to be loaded from somewhere else. In this implementation, I don't see that limitation to ever be something that we want to achieve.
So I don't agree with the idea that you don't want it to be loaded by somewhere else. You don't want the endpoint to be used by somewhere else. So GET requests can have side effects, which is a large part of what cores is protecting against. So if you perform a GET request, like you can actually have effects. You can log people out and things like that. So
yeah, but that's not sorry, this is a new implementation. We are not talking about browsers. Like my take here is that if it's needed, it's not needed for experimental. Okay, it's
sure. So we're gonna punt that.
My take here. If course is needed, let's evaluate once we so we can iterate on this. Like it's a big topic. Okay, so it's
sure. I'm just gonna mark it as punted. That's fine.
Yeah.
So HTTP local caching is also brought up. So this is the idea of you run Node or use an ahead of time tool and it synchronizes all the HTTPS or HTTP imports to disk. In general, I think this is our goal for production, is to always allow this because it's going to be more resilient. I don't think we need it for experimental.
Mm-hmm. The only reason why we might want to need it, it's if we have, it depends, okay? So it really is, this one is a key of the developer workflow. So from my point of view, we should have some level of flag that, like, essentially it should be unsafe so we should have a flag to do all this caching, put all this caching to disk, and that's the default. And if you don't, if you don't have this cache done, the system will basically not run until you do. So essentially, like the developer workflow for me should be, even though it's a little bit of a pain, it's node then dash download dapps or something, and you run it. And while it's running, it downloads them, put them on on disk. That's a nice known cache. You have it on disk, and from that on, it just downloads things forward. I don't know if this is like deciding this behavior. It's very important. Probably, I agree with you, not needed for experimental.
Yeah, so we do have the possibility of putting an unsafe flag. Discussing where to store the cache actually is going to be complicated, and if we respect things like cache headers within it. So
yeah, I would not respect the cache headers. It's forever.
That is my presumption too, but I'm going to mark this one also as punted.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. Like, this is topics of discussion. So the reason of this call, if this call is getting to the minimum amount of the implementation that we can agree on, and so that we can ship something experimental, then happy days.
Yes. I'm going to move these up. Oh, that was weird. Policies. Somebody wrote policies. What do they want to talk about?
Well, so the generic these things, it's if we don't have policies, this is going to be very.
I mean, I think policies are also experimental too, so we can't.
I know.
Can't block on it, but we can plan for support.
I am, you know, it's in order to have it without unflagged, we need, from my point of view, not needed now, but this is for unflagging. Like, I put those things into the requirements for unflagging because definitely those are both policies and resilience against ecosystem attacks are.
So I'm just putting everything in the experimental until I mark it as punted, and then I'm going to move it at the end.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
So policies integration with policies is done. Are there any specific policies we need to add? We've discussed a couple on the discussion thread. So size of module graph, and I think depth of module graph. There was one other. Timeout of module graph. So those are all general things. They're not specific to HTTPS. We can add them all to policies. Some of them might be required for unflagging, but if they don't use policies, they're not going to get that feature. So I don't know how people feel. Resilience.
Again, from my point of view, we need like this work. Before this work can exit experimental, it kind of depend on policies.
Okay. Let's mark it as blocking.
You know, from my point of view, it's as is blocking not for, but can be punted for development. Like from my point of view, we don't need a solution to this for experimental.
Sure, it's punted and blocking. Okay. Resilience against ecosystem attacks. Do we have specifics we want?
Well, we've wrote a lot about this between you and me, Bradley. So
yes.
You know what I think. So it's probably a long discussion that is probably worth a few days of work to bang our head together and get something out. So it still is another blocking problem from my point of view. Like, it's.
Is it punted though?
Yes, absolutely. Like, this is not, you know, I'm being very happy to ship something as long as with the idea of there is a list of things that we needed to be fixed before getting out of experimental. So.
And then we did have one from me, which isn't brought up. Attacks on the loader. So the HTTPS loader, at least in the PR, is vulnerable to various attacks. I don't think it's vulnerable to global alteration. It's more vulnerable to the fact that Node's core is very mutable. And so you can do things like muck around with HTTP classes, and it will affect the loader in that PR. I actually think this is a hard thing to fix.
It's non-fixable from my point of view. Like
you'd have to run it in a separate thread, which we've talked about with loaders in general, or do something else to isolate it.
It might be worthwhile running it in a separate thread, anyway, to the downloads. Okay, so it might be worthwhile doing it.
The only really bad thing that I think might be needed for production, I think we could even punt separate thread and isolation after we ship. I think the agent on how the HTTP client works is going to be really hard to get right.
You know, it is I think the agent in HTTP, the current HTTP client is so much a big pile of rubbish that I have started writing it. So from my point of view, if you have specific needs and requirements, then let's chat about them specifically, about the HTTP agent, essentially.
Yeah, so our main thing is total number of concurrent downloads going on in graphs can get rather large. So I've stress tested this against various things on unpackaged.com, and you can see 500 to 1,000 fetches on a decent size app. So
have you checked out the did you take a look at the API of the new Undici v4 output system? You can control all of this very granularly, to be honest.
About Undici, Matteo, do you think we could maybe add it to core just for this as an internal module?
Yeah, I would like at some point. The plan is to make that happen. Okay, so I would, the situation is that if we don't make it happen, like the situation of the current HTTP client is that we cannot make changes to it without making the fixes it needs without breaking everybody. So at the end, it will happen. I don't have a timeline for that, but I am very happy to, like, if it's needed, just put it in the dApps folder and be happy with it.
So that's kind of what I was working towards. Can we use something not the default client? So we're gonna say vendor. We can do that later, I think. But
yeah,
at least when you get that many downloads on the same domain, because that's how these CDNs often work.
Yeah.
The default client is not super happy.
I know. Don't tell me. I know. So it's it should be slightly better. So there are some options that you can tune and configure, Bradley, on the current HTTP client. So, but I've done extensive research on the performance of all of this, and it's just.
I am less experienced there. For sure.
Yeah, I'm going to share you, like, as I presented some of this in this talk. So it's let me get the link for you. I'm putting it in there. So it's so that you can. Just a second. Where is it?
I'm thinking about something that may be needed. What if the URL that we want to import needs some authentication using a cookie, for example?
Yes.
Is that a use case that we need to think about?
Well, headers. We need HTTP headers, authorization headers, and we need something for the authentication. I don't like. This is a big one.
So there's a variety of things you can do. I would prefer we punt cookies because cookies mean shared authority across modules. So if you know that there's a well-known endpoint that could use a cookie, you can just try to load it and see if you get something back. So that's where you get to cores and things like that.
I've put it in private registry support.
What does that mean?
So essentially, we need a way for users to host their own registry or proxy, which is authentication protected.
So right now it's just HTTP. Are you talking about like having a proxy in front of the public registry as well?
No, I mean, I want to, host my own HTTPS server that might not be even internal, okay? It might be on the public internet, but in order to access it, it requires some level of authentication, either in the form of a header or in the form of MTLS certificate, for example.
Okay, so cookies authorization header or cert.
And this should, from my point of view, can be for either scope or domain. So these are question mark. Like if it's a cert is for the domain. If we can decide that it's one for a whole domain essentially, or we can decide if it's one for a specific if it's one for a specific, for even a path on that domain, like you can specify an authorization for only a thing, but for me, it should be domain based. So,
domain or origin? Origin's just domain with port, basically.
The domain, the origin.
Okay. So that's all put into an authentication bullet point. Sounds like it's punted.
Yeah. That is, that's the. Yeah, it's an authentication point of view. It's yeah. I'll fix it. Go ahead. I'll fix it. So.
Okay. So this. I think these are all the things, and we can sort them now and get to action items. There's the most protection. This is over here. Punt. So everything except 2 large points is punted. We're actually gonna remove stuff from the PR, it looks like.
Well, I would say not after unflagging, okay?
So we can sort it, then let's add something.
Yeah, that's so there is stuff that is needed for unflagging, and then there is stuff that's needed for after it's unflagged. So
punted, needed for unflagging, and then punted after unflagging. So we had a couple after unflagging, attacks on the loader. We didn't talk about authentication if it's needed before.
Yeah, I think it's we need to, like, if we want people to test it and so on, we need to get some level of authentication support. Maybe, okay. Maybe not. Maybe we can actually not true. We can probably sort out authentication after unflagging.
I'm going to put cores under authentication. So authentication we can move after unflagging. Ecosystem attacks I think is needed before unflagging.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably the main point of contaction when we start discussing things. So
I think ecosystem attacks is partially going to be solved by policies and local caching.
Yeah, but again, all of these, like the security aspect is, I would just move the HTTPS is a must for production into the requirements for experimental. Like it's
Sure, that's fine, because
is-
it's supporting both is.
yeah, it's very trivial. So I think, yeah, I think it's.
Okay. So action items. Let's see what we got.
In the local development, there is the allow self-signed certificates that we can definitely move after unflagging from my point of view.
Okay. Local development. Are we punting the HTTP proxy and core to before or after unflagging?
I would do after unflagging. Like there is after unflagging, and then it needs to become a fixed after experiment. Like it will still be probably experimental for a bit after it's done. But
so unflagging, after unflagging, we're adding 2 for local development.
Yeah.
So the 2 after unflagging are self-signed certs and HTTP proxy support. We can decide if something needed.
Hey, sorry, just a quick update. I've got to run. Brad, I made you the host, so you'll be able to just stop the recording whenever you want, or Mateo or Michael have experience doing this stuff too.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so let's see. Decision, mixed mode, packages from NPM. We do likely need ways to load local things. I'm gonna say we don't actually have to do any work for that because policies and loaders, I think, handle this, because the whole reason it doesn't work is they can't resolve the origin. And neither policies nor loaders have a concept of resolving against a referring origin. So they don't do any sort of same origin checks. Those are just inherent in them doing the redirect. So I don't think we need to do anything, but I'm going to put it in requirements for experimental because I don't want to make a bullet point elsewhere.
Yeah, I think so. But it probably just need a test, okay? Like, just just put a test in, and that's fine. Yeah.
Just add a test to a way to load.
That it doesn't work and provides a good, error message. So it needs to be supported. Is the error message needs to be good. So that's the requirement. Okay, let me add this. Error message needs to be explicit on what to do.
So what would they do? I'm not sure what the error message could guide them to do.
Nothing. It's just don't mix. Like use if
yeah,
you want.
They don't. Just don't. Yeah, that's fine.
The question is you're doing something that is really insecure. So if you want to do this thing, see how to load that module using HTTP or something. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. This brings up local caching. There are some behaviors.
I'm actually adding a cache file format. It's
so I don't know if we need to do anything unless we want to make a single large file for cache file format. We could.
There is it really depends. So the structure in which you structure that file, that directory structure on disk, it will definitely impact the performance of the application. So
Correct.
there is this is like a cache probably folder file, and there is like, this needs to be documented, but also needs to be like, it's perf analysis to some extent. One of the reasons why I'm saying this, it's the directories on Windows. So, and I'm going to put down Windows as a separate check, because they cannot nest too much on Windows. Long paths do not work on Windows. So
at least in our proof of concept, we do a compression. We map large origins to printable ASCII and try to just increment the printable ASCII as you go. So like,
yes, but then it's like, why this is not really easy to debug. Okay, no, I'm sorry. I know I'm creating problems here. Okay, I am just.
It's not a problem. I'm just trying to understand, like, what do you mean easy to debug? Easy to debug. So like,
in node modules, I can just open it up.
Yes.
And find the right file and open it up and open the file.
Correct. But that's a debugging workflow. If we had symlinks, for example, or something that pointed to the
Symlinks do not work on Windows.
Kind of. You can have junctions if you really want to be pedantic.
Yeah, but no, they don't work on Windows Home. They only work on Windows Pro.
Junctions?
Yes.
They're working on my machine in the corner over here. I definitely
really?
don't.
Okay. Can you create them by hand? I don't know.
You cannot create symlinks without dev mode, but you can create junctions.
Okay.
Symlinks are different, which is also a weird thing.
Yeah, I verify everything works on Windows. Okay, that my topic here is, I know that Windows is very weird on that sense, and I don't want to be familiar with it. So I'm trusting somebody else to check that is I'm putting that as a requirement. Check that whatever solution we do would work on Windows.
Yes, we will do that. For your debuggability requirement, you want discoverable via file traversal. Right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And also you want the files to be in plain text and not compressed or something like that. Yeah.
Oh, that's an entirely different feature. Let's not go there if we compress things.
No, I know, but that's, those are,
it's good to write down.
It's good to write down, but to be honest, it can even be dual mixed mode or something if you want to have them. So it's not necessarily that one. We can have a hidden cache and then a materialized cache if we want it to be. It's.
Yes, we could check if there's a pre-process thing, but let's see, local caching. The big one for me is some behaviors get weird. So how do loaders /import.meta.url work? So when you load something off disk, should it behave exactly as if it was loaded off the network? Should it have the same import meta URL? We can't do that in our proof of concept, but we could do it in the real implementation when we get to it. Or should they explicitly show that they are not being loaded off network? I feel like both sides have pros and cons.
I would postpone it and completely until the loaders thing is closer to.
Loaders thing fixing is not going to fix this.
No, I know. I mean, the current state of loaders, yes. I haven't followed closely. Okay, so I would not put that as a needed for unflagging
So import meta URL then, because I do think that one is needed.
Yes, that's needed. Yes, on that I agree. Yeah.
In particular, I think import meta URL and discussing. Okay. Does URL work?
I think there shouldn't be an observable change to imports.meta.url.
So yeah, this gets into kind of security issues if there is, and what this means for ahead of time tools. So right now, attack is possible if you dynamic import and resolve against import meta URL in the proof of concept, you get file scheme permissions, which is a much bigger allowance than HTTP. So I do think in general, we need it to work. I'm just unclear on how we want it to work. Yeah. So really, all of these are going to have a lot of bullet points underneath them about specific features. Sorry for calling that one out specifically. So we should be the same as should not be observably different from loading off network.
I would go actually even further and say that the HTTP and HTTPS loader should not even know itself if it went through the network or through the cache. So in both cases, it should get the same information and use that information to run the module.
I tend to agree.
We do not have the infrastructure in place to do so. We would need to produce a asset loader, not for imports, just like for loading assets in general. There are some very old documents on asset loaders that got scrapped that we could try to.
I understand your point of view, Bradley. Now I so okay. My point is it should be HTTP. Like this is another one, but we need to talk about it essentially. Like it's not that we can't come up a solution now.
Yes, but I think it just needs to be marked as needed for unflagging for now.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Yeah. There is one more that we didn't talk about related to this topic, which is deduping.
Deduping based on file contents or based upon redirects? Because redirects are also interesting.
Yes, but again, it's a topic, okay? It's essentially, what do you do if two dependencies, once at the end of it, load the same content?
Yes. So
you're thinking about races?
No, I'm thinking about, so it is the thing, okay? So let's imagine you have a module that puts something in the global state. In the way we work right now, in Node, if you two module, like when you do require of, let's say you require Fastify, okay? And Fastify for some reason adds some global state, okay? If you have two versions of Fastify in your tree, two different versions, they will have their own different global state. If they are the same version, we'll have the same global state. Is like, do we want to change anything in this front or not? Because this is a key, you know, are two modules that are from two different trees allowed to share state?
So this does come up particularly with the different JavaScript CDNs where you have two different CDNs imported and they load React is the canonical scapegoat, load two different Reacts. They're the same version of React, but they live in different URLs.
Yeah, but even if they are in the same URL, like to some extent.
I do not believe you can currently load two.
No, with the question mark at the end, you could pass the question mark at the end if you want.
So at least in web, the question mark is intentionally treated as a different module entirely.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yes, that's what I meant by deduping.
I don't think we should change that because you can get different contents by adding question marks.
Okay,
So
then that's
like
good.
language equals Chinese. Would,
Yeah, okay.
So in particular, question marks are nice because they're easy to implement for most things, and you can get HTTP caching.
Yeah.
On them. So I don't think we should do that. For talking about this in redirects, do we want to follow the web's behavior on redirects? There's a long old thread on this, but the web, when you import something, and this is a problem, practically speaking, to support NPM-like behavior where you do a late resolution to a version. When you import something on the web, it marks its storage location in the global map as the requested URL, not the final resolved URL. So you can actually go and do this. I've used unpackage. You can load unpackage and resolve the React package. And when you load it just as React, you will get one package. If you then go and resolve it fully, so after all redirects using whatever mechanism you want, and then you import that, you actually get a second module in the web. There is a difference if we don't honor that, but there are also open issues questioning why the web did that on web specs. I think we should match the web, even though it hurts a lot of use cases. I don't know how other people feel.
I might say that we can postpone deduping after unflagging.
Okay, we're going to punt it after unflagging.
I would say that if we can sort out the resilience against ecosystem attacks and local caching, then we can, after those decisions have been made, we can make a good decision on this deduping bit and redirect. Like from my point of view, the resilience against ecosystem attacks comes first, then when compatibility on whatever the web does for redirects to some extent.
Okay. Yes, we can match what the web does. I think the PR currently does that. It just does not act like how file loading acts. So, which is fine.
I would just not like, again, I'm just doing this to remove all point of contention and and remove the noise. Okay.
All right. So it's 5 minutes ago. I need to get the action items going. Oops, that's the wrong heading. So action items. Remove cores from PR. Let's see. HTTPS must. Local development. We need enable local addresses. HTTP. Local addresses. HTTP. Don't need to do anything. Error message. messages, error messages. We need to do error message for cross origin blockage to file scheme, well, to non-HTTP compatible schemes. And then flag.
Do you include data URLs in non-HTTP compatible schemes?
So non-HTTP compatible schemes. HTTP, I can check the URL spec on this. Data and blob should be loadable. Oh no, it's in the module resolution on web. Module resolution. Fetching scripts. Fetch a single module script. Here we are. Failure. Fetch script settings. Data and blob should work, it looks like. Also, we do have a few schemes that are kind of random.
I have to go. I have another thing starting in 2 minutes. So
I think we're done. We're just writing action items.
it was really good, by the way. I think we can move forward to ship it.
Yes.
In the quick future. So I am like and also had some ideas on the some of the resilience against ecosystem attacks. So that might be good ones to talk about. So I did some thinking. So I'm gonna try to put that into something written down. So cool.
Yep.
Bye bye.
Yeah. Bye.
So yeah, it looks like cores is what actually does the blocking. So we just have to manually implement that without full cores. That's fine. So yeah, blob, data. I don't know if we want to include VM, which is unlikely. I don't think we want to include VM. It's allowed. Yeah, okay, that's it. I'm going to stop recording unless there's anything else.